My 25-year career at Hoffman Manufacturing was dead the moment Bradley Morrison walked through our factory doors wearing a suit that cost more than most of our guys make in a month. He had that look, like he'd been designed in some MBA laboratory specifically to destroy everything decent people had built with their bare hands. I'm Jerry Hoffman, 49 years old, been working these factory floors since I was 24, fresh out of community college with a degree in industrial engineering and calloused hands from summer jobs. I didn't go to Stanford or Harvard. I learned my trade the hard way, one mistake at a time until I knew every bolt, every calibration, every sound these machines make when they're running right. My Uncle Frank started this company back in 1978, building custom manufacturing equipment for steel mills and auto plants across the Midwest. When I joined up in '99, we had 30 employees and a reputation for equipment that lasted decades. Frank taught me that manufacturing wasn't just about making things, it was about making things right the first time, every time. I invented the quality control system that made Hoffman Manufacturing famous. Not a team effort, despite what our company website says now. It was 5 years of my life bled out in blueprints and prototype testing, working nights and weekends in my basement workshop while my wife Sarah brought me coffee and told me I was crazy for trying to automate what inspectors had been doing by hand for 50 years. It was an automated inspection system that could detect manufacturing defects with 99.7% accuracy before parts ever left our floor. Hairline cracks in steel beams that could cause bridge failures. Microscopic flaws in automotive components that could lead to recalls. It was elegant. It was precise. And it was mine. See, before I ever signed any paperwork with the company, my uncle's company, mind you, I did something that makes corporate lawyers break out in hives. I kept the patents. Frank understood. He said, "Jerry, you built it, you own it. We'll license it fair and square. Hoffman Manufacturing could use my systems. They could profit from them. They could build their reputation on them. But if they stopped honoring our agreement or violated the terms, I could shut the whole thing down." Think of it like lending your best tools to a neighbor. They can use them, they can make money with them, but they better treat them right, or they're coming home. When Frank passed 2 years ago, heart attack at 67, still came to work every day until the end, his kids inherited the business. Good kids, but they'd moved to California, become lawyers and consultants. They looked at the books, saw a profitable company, and decided they'd rather cash out than run a factory. That's when Morrison showed up. Morrison didn't know about my patent arrangement. Or maybe he didn't care. He was the new chief innovation officer brought in to modernize us, which is business speak for gut the workforce and sell to the highest bidder. The board had hired him after Frank's kids decided they needed professional management to prepare for a sale. He swept into my workshop that first Tuesday morning in September, smelling like expensive cologne and aggressive ambition. Started picking up my prototypes, handling them like toys at a store. "Gerald, right?" he asked, not really looking at me. He was too busy checking his reflection in my computer monitor. "I love what you've built here. Really solid foundation work. But we need to think bigger. We need to stop thinking traditional manufacturing and start thinking Industry 4.0 integration. Detects hairline cracks in steel components. Bradley," I said, keeping my voice level, "it's not a smartphone app." He laughed. Sharp, barking sound like a seal. "That's the old school thinking talking, Jerry. I need you to activate your innovation mindset. We're positioning for an acquisition. Big players are sniffing around. Midwest Industrial Partners. $30 million on the table, but they need a clean narrative. Complexity scares investors, Jerry. Complexity saves lives," I shot back. "These systems prevent bridge collapses, building failures. People die when corners get cut." He stopped smiling. Looked at me like I was a child trying to pay for groceries with Monopoly money. "We'll work on your pitch," he said, patting my shoulder. I stepped away. "Trust the process, Jerry. I'm going to make this company a lot of money." The process, it turned out, involved erasing me slowly. At first it was subtle. My name started disappearing from the technical documentation. The weekly production meetings I used to run got rescheduled to times I had conflicts with doctor appointments and my kids' school events. I'd walk past the conference room and see Morrison in there with the marketing team, pointing at whiteboards covered with my diagrams drawn in wrong colors, explaining my work to people who thought torque specifications were a type of coffee. It was frustrating, sure, but I wasn't worried about my job yet. You don't kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, right? I had 25 years in this place, patents in my name, and systems that generated half the company's revenue. That's what I told myself as I sat in my office on a gray October afternoon, watching the rain streak down the windows, nursing coffee that tasted like battery acid from the machine that had been broken for 3 months. Morrison said fixing it wasn't in the budget. The atmosphere was changing, getting heavy, like the air before a storm hits. The younger engineers stopped making eye contact. Calendars got filled with mysterious strategy sessions that somehow never included me. Guys I'd hired and trained, guys whose kids I'd bought Christmas presents for, started looking at their shoes when I walked by. Then I found the email. Left right on the break room counter, face up next to the sugar packets like someone wanted me to find it. It was from Morrison to the board of directors. Legacy personnel becoming friction points for MYP acquisition. Need to streamline operational narrative. Handling the JH situation. Expect resolution by Q4. The JH situation. That was me. Jerry Hoffman wasn't the senior manufacturing engineer anymore. I was a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. I picked up that paper. My hand didn't shake. That's the thing about me. I don't panic. I analyze. I folded it into a neat square, creased it sharp, put it in my pocket next to my reading glasses. If Morrison wanted to play games, he should have checked who wrote the rules first. Let me explain what they call the soft lockout in corporate America. It's not as dramatic as changing your key card access or packing your desk in a cardboard box. It's 1,000 tiny cuts designed to bleed your authority dry until you're a ghost haunting your own workspace, watching other people make decisions about work you've done for a quarter century. It started with the email lists. One morning in November, I woke up to find I'd been removed from leadership core and moved to general manufacturing, the list where people posted about potluck lunches and asked where the spare safety glasses were kept. 25 years of building systems, training engineers, solving problems that kept million-dollar contracts flowing, and suddenly I was getting emails about birthday cakes in the break room. When I confronted Dennis Walsh, our IT guy who I'd personally trained on network security protocols, he took 3 hours to reply. Hey Jerry, Brad restructured the communication architecture. Needed to streamline decision-making. You're in the right group now. The right group. I'd been demoted from the cockpit to the janitor's closet without a single meeting, without a single conversation. Just disappeared from the systems that mattered, erased like I'd never existed. Then came the incident with Jeremy Foster. Kid was 26, fresh business degree from Ohio State, wore khakis and polo shirts like a uniform. Morrison's new pet project with some made-up title like Process Innovation Specialist. Jeremy was sharp enough, reminded me of myself at that age, but he didn't understand the game being played around him. I was in the break room on a cold Tuesday morning, staring at the coffee machine like it might tell me the secrets of the universe, when Jeremy bounced in with that eager energy young guys have before the world beats it out of them. Hey Jerry, quick question, he chirped, oblivious to the fact that I was radiating leave me alone energy. I'm cleaning up the documentation for the MIP due diligence team. Brad said to make sure all the IP attributions are consistent. I saw your name on some of the legacy docs, but I can just replace that with Hoffman Manufacturing Proprietary Systems, right? Just to keep everything uniform. My blood went cold. Not hot, cold. Like someone had opened a freezer door in my chest. What exactly are you updating, Jeremy? He pulled out his tablet, swiped through a few screens. Yeah, see? Brad left a note here. Assert full corporate ownership. Remove individual attribution liabilities. Makes sense, right? Clean documentation for the buyers. I looked at the screen. It was a technical schematic of my automated inspection system architecture, the specific sensor array and feedback loop that made the whole thing work. The diagram I'd drawn by hand on graph paper in my basement workshop, then converted to KeyAdd files over months of late nights, right there in bold letters. Property of Hoffman Manufacturing, Inc. He wasn't just erasing me from the history books. He was legally claiming ownership of the land my house was built on. Under the terms of our licensing agreement, the one Morrison clearly hadn't bothered to read, Hoffman Manufacturing had usage rights, not ownership. They could use my systems, profit from them, market them, but they couldn't claim they invented them. Claiming ownership to a third party like MIP wasn't just wrong. It wasn't just unethical. It was fraud. Interesting, I said, keeping my voice steady. Jeremy, could you email that to me? I want to double-check some of the technical specifications before you finalize anything. Sure thing, he said, tapping away on his tablet. You're the best, Jerry, always looking out for the details. Poor kid. He had no idea he'd just handed me the ammunition to destroy his boss. I went back to my desk and waited. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, there it was in my inbox. MIP Acquisition Technical Portfolio V3.2, final.pdf. I didn't storm into Morrison's corner office. I didn't call an emergency meeting. I opened my personal email, never, ever use company email for the kill shot, and forwarded the file to Patricia Rodriguez, a labor attorney I knew from my union days back in the 80s. Woman who could make great white sharks look like goldfish when it came to contract law. My message was simple and direct. Timestamp this contract violation. Patricia replied in 8 minutes. Received and documented. Clear breach of Section 7 licensing terms. Ready to execute legal action? I stared at the blinking cursor. Not yet. If I pulled the trigger right now, Morrison would spin it as a disgruntled old-timer sabotaging the company out of spite. He'd probably get sympathy from the board, maybe even from some of my own guys. No, I needed him to commit fully. I needed him to lie so boldly, so publicly, in front of so many witnesses that there would be no walking it back, no claiming it was a misunderstanding. I needed the humiliation to be complete and absolute. I typed back, "Wait, let him dig the grave deeper first." The next few days were surreal. I sat in meetings where they discussed the future of systems I'd built without asking the man who built them. I watched Morrison strut around the factory floor like he owned the place, shaking hands with potential buyers, pointing at my equipment and talking about revolutionary automation solutions while I stood 20 feet away, invisible. He even bought one of those executive stress balls, kept squeezing it during meetings like he was strangling something small and helpless. Every time they cleared another hurdle with MIP, he'd send out a company-wide email. Legal review complete. Financial audit passed. Due diligence ahead of schedule. Each email was another nail in his coffin. He just didn't know it yet. He called me into his corner office on a Thursday afternoon in early December. Late in the day, sun already setting behind the gray clouds that hung over our part of Ohio like a dirty blanket. The office still smelled like Frank's pipe tobacco, even though Morrison had been there 3 months. Some things you can't just paint over. Morrison didn't offer me a chair. Power play, probably learned it in some MBA seminar about establishing dominance. He sat behind Frank's old oak desk, the one Frank's father had built by hand in 1952, leaning back in a new leather chair that cost more than most of our guys made in a week. "Jerry," he said, fingers steepled like a villain in a bad movie, "we need to discuss your transition." "What transition?" "The MIP deal closes next Friday," he said, straightening his tie. "They want a fresh start with streamlined operations, and frankly, your salary is heavy for what we'll need going forward. We're offering you early retirement, 8 months severance, full benefits through next summer, and a nice reference letter. Sign a standard release agreement, and you walk away clean. Everybody wins." I looked around Frank's office. The walls were covered with photos of equipment we'd built, bridges and buildings that were still standing because we'd done the work right. There was a picture of Frank and me from 2018, standing next to the first automated inspection system we'd installed at a steel mill in Gary, Indiana, both of us grinning, like idiots because we'd just solved a problem that had been plaguing the industry for decades. "And if I don't take your generous offer," Morrison's smile got sharper, "then we terminate for cause. Failure to adapt to new operational standards, resistance to change initiatives, inability to work effectively within restructured teams. We'll fight your unemployment claim and make sure every manufacturing company in the Midwest knows you're difficult to work with." He was threatening to blacklist me. Actually sitting there in my dead uncle's chair, threatening to destroy a 25-year reputation because I wouldn't roll over and play dead for his acquisition. "You know, Bradley," I said, keeping my voice level, "Frank always said that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them the first time." "Frank's dead, Jerry. This is business. Nothing personal. Everything about this was personal. This was my life's work, my legacy, my contribution to keeping people safe. But Morrison saw it as line items on a spreadsheet, obstacles to his big payday. I'll think about it, I said. You have until tomorrow's all-hands meeting, he said, already turning back to his computer screen. Don't make this ugly, Jerry. Nobody wants that. Wouldn't dream of it, I said. I walked out of that office and went straight to the shop floor. Spent an hour just listening to the hum of the machines, watching my inspection systems work exactly like they were supposed to. Red lights, green lights, precise measurements flashing on monitors that most people couldn't read, but I understood like my native language. 25 years of my life lived in those control panels. Tomorrow, if Morrison got his way, those lights were going to go dark. The main conference room at Hoffman Manufacturing was what we called the fishbowl. Glass walls on 3 sides, right in the center of the office area, so everyone could see what happened inside. Frank designed it that way on purpose, said if you were making decisions that affected people's livelihoods, you shouldn't hide behind closed doors. Today, the entire company was crammed inside for Morrison's strategic realignment all hands. Every engineer, every machinist, every office worker, all squeezed together like sardines. The air was thick with tension and the smell of too many people in too small a space. Morrison stood at the head of the table, flanked by 3 board members who'd flown in from Chicago for the pre-acquisition celebration. They looked like vultures in expensive suits, picking at catered sandwiches while they calculated their cut of the $30 million. Morrison was practically vibrating with excitement. He had the energy of a man who thought he was about to become very rich, very quickly. I stood in the back, leaning against the wall next to the American flag Frank had hung there in 2001, wore my usual work clothes, dark jeans, company polo shirt with Hoffman Manufacturing embroidered on the chest, steel-toed boots that had walked these floors for a quarter century. Not dressed for a funeral, but definitely dressed for demolition. Team, Morrison started, voice carrying easily without a microphone. Today, we stand at the threshold of transformation. Midwest Industrial Partners has recognized what I've been telling you for months. Hoffman Manufacturing isn't just a company. We're an industry leader in precision automation technology. A few people clapped, mostly the newer office staff who didn't know any better. The veteran guys, the ones who remembered when this was a family company that cared about its people, just stared at their shoes. To get here, Morrison continued, pacing like a caged animal, we had to make tough decisions. We had to trim operational inefficiencies. We had to evolve from a legacy mindset to a growth-first mindset. He stopped pacing and turned slowly, deliberately, until he was looking straight at me across that crowded room. Jerry, he said, not Mr. Hoffman, not even Gerald, just Jerry, like he was talking to a child. You've been with us for 25 years. You built our original quality control systems. For that contribution, we thank you. He paused for dramatic effect. This was theater, carefully orchestrated to humiliate me in front of everyone I'd worked with, everyone who respected me. But, he said, voice dropping to a theatrical whisper that somehow carried to every corner of that silent room, what got us here won't get us there. We need visionaries who understand market dynamics, not just technicians who understand machinery. We need people who grasp that innovation is worthless if it doesn't scale profitably. My face burned, but I kept my expression neutral as stone. Let him talk. Let him put every word on the record in front of 50 witnesses. I offered you a generous early retirement package, Morrison said, lying through his teeth to a room full of people who'd worked alongside me for decades. You refused to accept the changing realities of our industry. You threatened to obstruct our growth initiatives over technical details. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. He was painting me as the villain, the stubborn old man standing in the way of everyone's prosperity, everyone's future. So, Morrison said, straightening his shoulders like a soldier preparing for battle, effective immediately. Jerry Hoffman, your employment with this company is terminated. For cause. Security will escort you from the premises. He gestured toward the door. 2 security guards, Bill Martinez and Tony Rodriguez, guys I'd known for 15 years, guys whose kids had been in my son's scout troop, stood there looking like they wanted to disappear into the floor. It was choreographed. Morrison wanted this visual, the old guard being physically removed to make way for his vision of the future. 2 guys I'd worked alongside for years, forced to march me out like a common criminal because their boss needed to prove a point, looked around that room, at the board members watching with cold calculation, at my engineering team, guys I'd hired, trained, mentored through difficult projects and family problems. Dennis Walsh gave me the tiniest nod, almost imperceptible. A few of the machinists looked like they wanted to say something but knew better. I pushed off the wall. Didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't launch into a speech about loyalty and dedication and 25 years of service. "You're making a mistake, Bradley," I said. My voice was quiet, but in that dead silent room, it carried like a gunshot. "The only mistake," he sneered, "was keeping dead weight this long. Your patents belong to this company, Jerry. Read your licensing agreement. Now get out. Read your licensing agreement." The irony was so thick you could cut it with a plasma torch. I picked up my coffee mug from the table by the door. A Christmas gift from my nephew Danny had a picture of my 1967 Mustang on it. Walked past the table of board members, past Morrison, who was already turning back to the room, dismissing me like I was yesterday's newspaper. I felt every eye in that room on my back as I walked to the door. They expected a scene, expected the old man to break down or fight back or make some desperate plea. Instead, I stopped at the threshold and turned back. "Bradley," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "you just made the biggest mistake of your career." Then I walked out. The security guards moved to escort me, but I waved them off. "I know the way, boys," I said to Bill and Tony. "Been walking these halls longer than either of you." I walked out of the fishbowl, through the office area, past the shop floor where I'd spent half my life solving problems and making things work better. As I passed my old workstation, I grabbed my father's slide rule from the desk drawer, the one thing in that building that truly belonged to me. The elevator doors closed just as I heard Morrison's voice booming from the conference room. "Now, let's talk about the exciting future ahead of us." I pulled out my phone before I'd even reached the parking lot. Opened my text thread with Patricia Rodriguez. Patricia. He did it. Public termination for cause and explicitly claimed ownership of my patents in front of the board, the buyers, and 50 witnesses. "Jerry, he's finished. Execute the license revocation?" I stood next to my pickup truck in the gray December afternoon, looking back at the building where I'd spent most of my adult life. The place where Frank had taught me that good work matters, that building things right the first time isn't just about money, it's about integrity. Execute it. 24-hour notice starts now. There's a specific kind of quiet that comes after you light the fuse on something explosive. It's not silence, it's the pause before the world changes forever. I drove home to my house on Maple Street, the same house Sarah and I bought in 2003 when our son Mike was in high school. Small place, but the mortgage was paid off and I had a 2-car garage with a workshop where I restored classic motorcycles on weekends. I didn't turn on the news or check the company website to see whatever lies Morrison's people were already spinning about workforce optimization and strategic realignment. Instead, I opened a beer and sat on my back porch watching Mrs. Patterson's cat hunt something in the pile of leaves by the fence. And I thought about the email that was sitting in Hoffman Manufacturing's legal department, probably being read by Ronald Hayes right about now. Patricia had sent it at exactly 3:42 p.m. Notice of license revocation. Immediate action required. Gerald Hoffman hereby exercises his right to revoke all usage rights to patents US 7842391 and US 8156742, the Hoffman Quality Control System, due to material breach of licensing agreement, Section 7, false claims of ownership, and Section 12, termination without cause. This revocation is effective 24 hours from receipt of this notice. Hoffman Manufacturing Incorporated must cease all operations utilizing the licensed technology or face immediate litigation for patent infringement. It was a kill switch, an industrial EMP that would shut down half their production capacity and turn their $30 million acquisition into worthless scrap metal. Morrison wouldn't see it right away. He was too busy celebrating, probably already planning how to spend his bonus money. But Ron Hayes, their general counsel, would read it and understand immediately what it meant. Around 6 p.m., my phone buzzed. Text from Dennis, still holed up in the IT department. "Dennis, weird energy here. Ron just ran into Brad's office looking like he saw a ghost, shouting behind closed doors." I smiled, took another sip of beer. "Dennis, I'm doing fine. Keep your head down and don't get caught in the crossfire." By 8 p.m., the first call came. Not Morrison. He was too proud for that. It was Ron Hayes, the general counsel, and his voice sounded like he'd been gargling gravel. "Jerry," he said, trying to sound calm but clearly fighting panic, "we received some concerning documentation from your attorney today." "Hello, Ron." You mean the license revocation notice? Let's not be hasty here, he said, attempting a reasonable tone. Bradley was heated this afternoon. The termination situation. We can reclassify that as a voluntary separation. Early retirement like you discussed. We can even improve the severance package substantially. Ron, I said, settling deeper into my porch chair. Bradley made it crystal clear in front of 50 witnesses that he thinks my patents belong to your company. Since he seems confused about who owns what, I'm just helping clarify the legal reality. Jerry, be reasonable. Midwest Industrial Partners signs the final papers Monday morning. If this licensing cloud is hanging over our core IP, they'll walk away from the entire deal. You're not just hurting Bradley, you're destroying the company's value, everyone's jobs. The company has no value without my systems, Ron. And Bradley made that crystal clear when he called me dead weight and had me escorted out like a criminal. I paused, watching a hawk circle over the neighbor's field. You've got 18 hours left to figure it out. I hung up and blocked Ron's number. Then I saw Morrison's name flashing on my screen. I let it ring once, twice, then sent it straight to voicemail. He called 11 more times in the next 20 minutes. I could picture him in Frank's old office, tie loosened, sweat beading on his forehead, staring at his phone like it had betrayed him. He was used to intimidating people into submission, used to throwing around corporate authority until problems disappeared. But you can't bully physics, and you can't threaten a patent holder who doesn't need your money or your approval. I grilled a steak, watched the evening news, called my son Mike to check in, slept like a baby. The next morning I woke up at 7 a.m. sharp, less than 9 hours until the deadline. My phone was a graveyard of missed calls and panicked text messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Word was spreading through the company like wildfire. At 9:30 a.m. my phone rang. Unknown number, Chicago area code. This is Jerry, Mr. Hoffman. This is William Crawford, lead counsel for Midwest Industrial Partners. We received some very concerning documentation regarding the intellectual property status of your quality control systems. Do you have a moment? I smiled, settling into my kitchen chair with a fresh cup of coffee. For you, William? All the time in the world. Crawford sounded exactly like a man who bills $800 an hour. Smooth, emotionless, sharp as a surgical instrument. Let me understand the timeline here, Crawford said. I could hear papers shuffling in the background. You hold the primary utility patents for the automated inspection technology. You licensed it to Hoffman Manufacturing 5 years ago. Yesterday afternoon, their acting CEO terminated your employment and publicly asserted full ownership of said patents in front of witnesses. That's correct. He also violated non-disparagement clauses and founder protection provisions in the process. I see. And your license revocation takes effect in approximately 6 hours. I checked my watch. 3:42 p.m. exactly. Mr. Hoffman, Crawford said, and his tone shifted slightly. More respectful now. MIP is prepared to deploy $30 million based on the legal premise that Hoffman Manufacturing owns or has perpetual irrevocable rights to this technology. If that license is revoked, we're essentially purchasing office furniture and some very expensive paperweights. I built that technology from scratch, William. Without my systems, those machines are just metal boxes that make pretty lights. Understood. Thank you for your candor. I need to make some urgent calls. He hung up. I poured another cup of coffee and settled in to watch the fireworks. The phone calls came in, waves after that. Board members I'd never spoken to, MIP executives, lawyers I'd never heard of. Each conversation was shorter than the last, more desperate. By noon, the panic was palpable. At 1:30 p.m., I got a text from Dennis. Jerry, they're in full crisis mode. Board flew an emergency session. Brad's been locked in conference room for 2 hours. Lawyers everywhere. At 2:15 p.m., exactly 87 minutes before the deadline, my phone rang one final time. It was Charles Bennett, the board chairman. Jerry, his voice was hoarse, defeated. We need to talk. Hello, Charlie. Bradley Morrison has been terminated, effective immediately. We're prepared to offer you full reinstatement as Senior Vice President of Engineering, a $200,000 salary increase, and restoration of all licensing agreements under the original terms. I looked out my kitchen window at the oak tree Frank and I had planted when I first started at the company. 25 years old, strong and deep-rooted now. That's generous? Charlie. But I'm not interested. Jerry, please, be reasonable. What do you want? I want my intellectual property back. Full ownership transfer, no licensing, no partnerships. I keep the patents, you keep the coffee machine. Silence stretched for nearly a minute. That would effectively shut down half our operations. That's what happens when you fire the guy who invented those operations. The board will never approve that. Then at 3:42 p.m., you'll be in breach of patent law, MIP will walk away, and your company will be worthless. Your choice, Charlie. Another long silence. Then, give me 1 hour. At 3:30 p.m., exactly 12 minutes before the deadline, Patricia Rodriguez called me. Jerry, you beautiful bastard. They caved completely. Asset transfer agreement just hit my inbox. Full patent ownership reverts to you, all licensing obligations terminated, and they're paying your legal fees. And Morrison? Gone. Security escorted him out an hour ago. Word is he's facing potential criminal charges for fraudulent representation to investors. I hung up and walked out to my garage, started up my 1973 Harley, the one I'd been restoring for the past 3 years. She purred like a satisfied cat. 2 weeks later, I got a call from William Crawford at MIP. Mr. Hoffman, we understand the situation at Hoffman Manufacturing has changed significantly. We're still very interested in your automation technology. Would you consider licensing directly to us? I was in my basement workshop, blueprints spread across Frank's old drafting table, designing improvements to the inspection system. Refinements I'd been thinking about for years, but never had the freedom to pursue. William, I'm starting my own company, Hoffman Engineering Solutions. When I'm ready to talk business, I'll let you know. What about your non-compete agreement? I laughed. What non-compete? They fired me, remember? 6 months later, I had 15 employees, all handpicked from the best people who'd left Hoffman. Manufacturing after Morrison's disaster, Dennis Walsh ran our IT department. Jeremy Foster, who'd learned some hard lessons about corporate loyalty, headed up our documentation team. Even Bill Martinez and Tony Rodriguez joined us as our security consultants. We operated out of a renovated warehouse on the south side of town, with equipment that was older but better maintained than anything Morrison ever bought. Our first contract was with a steel company in Indiana, $5 million for a complete quality control overhaul. Meanwhile, Hoffman Manufacturing limped along with 40% of their former capacity, trying to reverse engineer systems they never understood. Last I heard, they were facing lawsuits from customers whose products failed inspection because their jury-rigged quality control couldn't match my specifications. Morrison? He moved to Phoenix, started a consulting company that lasted about 8 months before the investors figured out he was selling expensive promises wrapped around other people's ideas. Some people never learn. I kept Frank's picture on my office wall, the one of us at that Gary steel mill, grinning like we'd just solved the world's problems. In a way, we had. We'd proven that you could build something that mattered, something that lasted, something that made the world a little bit safer. Sarah brings me coffee in the mornings now, just like she did all those years ago when I was working in the basement. Except now she's not telling me I'm crazy. She's telling me I'm finally free. Real power doesn't announce itself with expensive suits and fancy titles. It simply acts with precision and the patience to let consequences unfold naturally. They thought they could extract the value and discard the creator, but engineering isn't mining, it's gardening. Fire the gardener and everything dies.